So the things that I consider to be essential are timelines, and there are selective timelines for naturalization and immigration. You just need to know that. And there's a thing that I've given you that is naturalization information available on the internet. It's just a one-pager. And then I've also given you a 5-pager on naturalization terms and acronyms. Those are not mine. Now, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to mute everyone and then share the screen. Or I was going to mute everyone anyway. Yes, mute all. And then at the end, you will be able to unmute yourself at the very end. So let's get started with this exciting topic of naturalization. I'm going to go to the share screen. And if I can find it to my slideshow. And I'm assuming you can see this. Debbie, if you can see this, or Jan, if you can see this, put your thumb up, please. And when I proceed to the next slide, let me know if you would, please. By thumbs up, just either Debbie or Jan. So naturalization, the information I've got for you today is information you can really use, whether or not your person came to the United States or to the colonies, as it were, before 1620 or so, or they came at some time after, or even if they came to the United States last year. At least you're going to have some way to begin to get into this intriguing and very, very in-depth process for naturalization. So what is naturalization? First of all, it's the process by which an alien becomes an American citizen. And if you want the definition on alien, you're going to be able to look in that naturalization term or acronym file, because it will tell you about aliens, but also alien registration files and registration forms. So it takes you way beyond that. First of all, be aware of the fact, and I'm sure you are, that the US Congress makes all the laws on naturalization for the United States. So even when Texas says they want to make their own, they don't get to. There can be, at times in our history of naturalization and immigration, people that expand naturalization without people having to do paperwork, as in a mass naturalization. For example, when a part of Mexico was annexed to Texas, and those people came in, they did not file papers, they did not do certain things, they were automatically annexed. I won't go into other examples of this, but you should know about that in general. When you're talking about naturalization, don't assume that the process we have in the United States is at all the same as it is for other countries. You need to check their definition so you know what naturalization means in that country. For example, we have lots of people in Montana and in the Dakotas and in Canada who are what we call Germans from Russia. They are unique in that these folks homesteaded. They were Germans who were specifically asked to homestead in Russia a couple of centuries ago. And their process was totally different. The things that they had to agree to and that they were given are totally different. So be aware that you can have some very different things. I'm changing a slide now. This is a slide which will show you, hopefully, the process today for becoming a US citizen. You have to be at least 18 and you have to formally apply with that application for naturalization. And I'm going to say, hey, if you're out plunking around on the computer, you want to go out there to that site and actually see what that formal process looks like. You have to be lawfully admitted, be permanent, continuous resident of the United States for 5 years. That's the rule right now. Previously, it's been as little as 2 years if you were formally applying, or no years if you were just automatically admitted. You must be of good moral character, demonstrate knowledge of the U.S. Constitution. You have to be able to read, write, speak, and understand English. And that's very interesting. I'm going to ask you at some point this summer or next fall to take time and take the citizenship test. I think you'll be amazed. And of course, you have to demonstrate knowledge of the U.S. history, of government, of civics, and then you're going to take an oath of allegiance. By the way, if you haven't been to a recent citizenship ceremony in your district court, wherever you live, then take time to do that. I think it'll be quite refreshing for you. In the past, from about the 1780s, reminding you again of, that we declared that we were independent in 1776, that is, and went forward. Naturalization has been defined and redefined many times by the U.S. Congress. Prior to the 1780s, you'll find that naturalization in the United States was defined by the United Kingdom or England. But you need, in order to find a naturalization record, here's some things that you have to have in mind and that you should do. And yes, you need these before you actively search. You need to have a timeline in your hands of U.S. naturalization acts and so on, specifically, so that you can look at the context and the times of the ancestor you're trying to find. If you're looking at someone who comes in 1820, that's going to be totally different from the rules of a person who comes in 1770 or 1870. You need this set of naturalization terms, and you need to look at them as they apply to the documents you're going to find. So the terms and a timeline of naturalization and immigration, those are tools that are just essential. I've given you a U.S. Naturalization strategies as a guidance tool, things you need to ask yourself so that when you can't find what you want after having used these tools, you can review the strategies and go forward. I will also take emails from you. But I want you to use the online tool suggestions. They are going to lead you forward, those naturalization strategies that I've given you. My goal always is to find all the pertinent naturalization documents and write a summary of how they apply to each person that I am looking at for the Americanization of that person and then the naturalization. So for example, when my grandma came in 1886, I want to look at that timeline that shows what the rules were like just prior to 1886, so I can best see what kinds of laws and rules apply to my grandma. I want to be able to apply the relevant terminology because they're going to use relevant terminology, at least after 1906. I'm going to search for known documents. For example, I want to know enough about a thing called a declaration of intention to know whether I should search for that or not in the time period. The petition is actually the naturalization document, or is the declaration of intention being called first papers? Is the petition being called a final paper? Because that could happen, especially if your family is talking about those. You should know about immigration lists from our country and also from other countries and where to find them. The ships lists, and let's not forget this thing called the police lists that the Scandinavian countries did first. No, they weren't looking for wanted people. They were actually making sure that ships got you to where you were supposed to go and you were still alive. And that's how that came about. So these come about in stages. Any info that you've got supplied, say if you're out at Ancestry or you're out at Find My Past or out at My Heritage, someplace where you're looking at, or even a thing called ships lists, if you're going to look there to make a search, I know we all just want to do the search. Save yourself the time. Take 5 minutes and read their info so you can see what they really have and their hints for finding things. And for heaven's sakes, be prepared to use various spellings of your ancestor's name. No, they didn't always spell it one way, and they didn't get to spell it frequently. So whoever took their name in may have recorded it far differently. I keep finding more and more variations for my Coglizer family. I have 26 of them recorded. I have another one I've got to put on that list. Yep, I found another one. Oh, here's where you need to make notes on this sheet. So I'll keep it here for 30 seconds. I've given you the naturalization timeline, the first one at flow of history. That's that brief timeline of US policy, blah, blah, blah. You have that. I gave that to you today as a handout. But the second one I did not give you because it is just too long. So you're going to look out at www.history.com/immigration/immigration-United-States-timeline. Or you can just go out to US history and at least go to immigration there and then begin to look at the iterations, because you and I know that they will change these things. But make sure you get this one down today because this one's too long. And by the way, it's the one that will give you what I call 10-second reading background, where you'll just say, in 10 seconds, they told me what I needed to know for this particular thing. And now I think I can remember it. And if I can't, I know where to come back. Using that timeline is one of the most essential things you'll do for your sanity. Otherwise, you're going to come up and tell me, Jan, I've searched everywhere. No, you haven't. Don't assume that you know those laws and circumstances under which your ancestor entered the U.S. and gained citizenship. Don't assume that because supposedly someone jumped ship and came in, that there isn't any proof that they weren't a citizen or that they didn't go through a citizenship process. Take a look, see what you find. One of the first things you can do is read about the Steerage Act of 1819 and its failures. This is, the Steerage Act in the United States was where we demanded that people coming in, that ships' captains had to have that list of people so we knew who they had at the beginning and who they had at the end. But news for you, Norway, a few other countries had been doing that for a while because they suffered great losses when people were still just coming into Quebec. What's really neat is I want you to remember this. Every single rule or law that you see in these naturalization and immigration lists has paperwork connected with it. You could potentially find paperwork about your families. Federal records demanded the paperwork. So if you see a law, if you're like me, you're going to say, oh, goody, I'm going after the goodies. In 1875, our US Supreme Court finally said, no, states, it's simply the responsibilities of the US federal government to make and enforce the immigration laws. So even if you've seen things or flaky stuff where you said, well, a state okayed this particular thing, be very wary. Go look for more documents. I'm not saying you won't have an interesting document in the interim, but you won't have the final one. So do go look. I'll give you a little hint of where we're going today. Before I finish this process today, you're going to know why a woman who lived on foreign soil for just 2 years would lose her citizenship, or could. Things weren't too kind for women before 1919, 1920, when we got the right to vote, and with it, a plethora of other things that we ourselves as women demanded and added in. It's a wonderful period of time, but I want you to remember that before about 1920, if you were in the US as a woman, you didn't have a lot of rights. And one of the rights you didn't have automatically was to your citizenship. So let's talk about that. I can only talk about random things today that I think are important for you to realize within that list. And I hope it intrigues you enough to make sure you print off that immigration sheet and law and the policies that govern those things, and the other one that I gave you a connection to at history. Because the Expatriation Act of 1907, it says it's an act, but it was only for women. In March of 1907, Congress passed the Expatriation Act, which decreed, among other things, that U.S. women who married a non-citizen were no longer Americans. So I want you to look at my great-grandma, Mary. I had two great-grandmas named Mary, by the way, but this great-grandma, Mary, happened to have been born in the United States, married a Canadian citizen, and it wasn't until after he died that she even thought about voting. And I still haven't found that she was able to vote, so she didn't go through a naturalization process to regain her citizenship. None of these rules that are in this act applied to American men if they chose a spouse, and the spouse was a foreigner. If you think that we got wiser in nothing flat, we didn't. I kid you not. It was originally, this law was upheld by the Supreme Court in 1915. It wasn't until 1922 that this got straightened up by another act. We call it the Cable Act of 1922, but it's the Married Women's Independent Nationality Act, which said women kept their citizenship at that point in 1922 if they married a man who could become a citizen, even if he said he wasn't going to become a citizen. So they could keep that. But guess what? They had to opt in. And guess what? You would think that when this law, the Married Women's Independent Nationality Act, you would think that it took care of anyone who lost their citizenship before 1922, but it didn't do that automatically. You had to go in and actually apply and go through the process. We're going to take a look at one of those today that happened right here in Cascade County. I'm just going to tell you about some other things that are a little more recent. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. We didn't have a lot of immigration, of course, in the 1930s when we were in the Depression and during World War II, because of course there were whole bunches of things going on. But after World War II, we were aware of problems that other countries were having as a result of recovering from the effects of World War. And we passed special legislation, emphasis, special legislation that enabled refugees from Europe and from the Soviet Union to enter the United States, but it was special. Following the communist revolution in Cuba in 1959, hundreds of thousands of refugees from that island also gained admittance, and it was through special legislation. Finally, in 1965, our U.S. Congress passed the Immigration and Nationality Act, which did away with quotas based on nationality, allowed Americans to sponsor relatives from their countries of origin, and that's been one of the primary motivators for people coming in and ways in which they could become citizens. I want you to remember that because you're going to hear that being talked about a lot today. We're in the midst again of grappling with immigration and naturalization processes in the United States, and for our U.S. Congress, there are no easy answers. But again, I'll tell you, no state can go off on its own. Just so you know, I'm somehow comforted by that. So there's been some more recent laws I'll just quickly call your attention to, because for every law that's ever made, I want you to realize that there were whole bunches of things happening in the 30s. And the late 20s, for instance, we did wholesale prevention. Chinese could not gain citizenship even if they came here. Japanese could not gain citizenship and so on. I'm just giving you a brief outline. But in '86, President Ronald Reagan signed into law what's called the Simpson-Mazzoli Act, which granted amnesty at that point to more than 3 million immigrants who were living illegally here in the United States. Now, a lot of immigrants who come in who are living illegally, came here originally on visas. The visa ran out. And so that's one more way in which they have crossed a border. But when they came in the United States, they were legal at that point. They just have other things to do. In 2001, the USA Patriot Act amended the Immigration and Nationality Act to broaden the scope of aliens ineligible to come to the United States if they were involved in terrorist activities. And we've all been living with that for the last 23 years. My point today is that you need to keep up with these rules. These are not static. You need to have this timeline so that you can get to the relevant information info for your ancestors' timeline. You might be looking at totally the wrong thing. I also want to make you aware of the fact that there were lots of people who came into the United States and they did not automatically, or even within 2 years, 4 years, or whatever the rule was at that time, they didn't automatically apply for citizenship. Maybe it was because they didn't know the language too well, or they were comfortable with just being here because they were full well accepted. So you need to be aware of whether or not your person even sought citizenship. I want to remind you again that even though those rules before the 1780s largely came for us out of the common law in England, that Thomas Paine, when he published his pamphlet on common sense in 76, said that the colonists in the United States were in Britain colonies, but Paine made the case for a new America. Europe and not England is the parent country of America. I want you to remember that because it follows through illogically sometimes in terms of the rules you will see. You're going to look through these rules and say, why did they do that? Well, you need to look at the history and you need to look at that second timeline I've given you with that 10-second explanation so that you can see because it's here. And again, I've given you another opportunity to see that www.history.com link right here. Remember, even though they came into the United States, there were many people from various parts of Europe by the 1780s. I want to show you one of my family examples. Now, I already knew about my grandpa Engvald Beck's life, and I had timelined him pretty well. I knew that he came as a 14-month-old in about 1880, 1879, 1880 with his parents. I knew that his dad had been here once before. And what I was looking for was trying to find the entire Beck family, the people who came. And so they did what we would call chain migration. That's similar to, being able to ask and get your relatives into the United States. They come by chain migration. So in 1867 in April, over in Norway, Niclene Hansdottir Beck and her father-in-law, Johannes Olsen, and her brother-in-law immigrated from Norway. They were bound for America to meet up with Niclene's husband, who was already there in Minnesota. They went via Quebec. So far, I haven't found any papers because the papers weren't available there. I keep looking, however, I never give up. In 1870, Ole, that's the guy who was there first. Yeah, Ole and Lena. I kid you not, Nicolina was called Lena. So I have my Ole and Nicolina, or Lena, and their father, Johannes. They were recorded in the 1870 Minnesota census. That's exciting. And it's exciting because they were recorded as having come from Norway. Another way for you to see where these people come from. In 1871, my great-grandpa Andreas Johannesson, back there in Norway, all from this family, married his first wife, Ingeborg Martha Petersdottir, in Leksvik, little tiny community, Nord-Trøndelag County in Norway. And bonus, when they signed up for their ship, they signed up with the Beck name, which is very, very cool. Because 5 years later, I'll tell you, when Andreas went back to Norway, he signed up under his old patronymic, and it was difficult to find. And by 1872, they had immigrated to the U.S. from Norway, and they were here. Actually, Andreas comes back with his second wife and family in 1879, 1880. So what I'm looking for is any significant rule in the timeline that tells me what immigration he would be under. And primarily it looked like he was under the first really significant federal legislation on immigration that required that they were immigrating. It actually says immigrating, specified when you could take out first papers and file the naturalization petition, 2 years and 5 years. So it looked like it was a straightforward path to citizenship, but only for those from Europe. Men could apply. They didn't have to apply for their wives or their children. The wives and children would be automatically included with the citizenship through the man's application. Now, let me tell you why it's harder to find some of these things. Prior to 1906, there was no standardized application. If there was no standardized application and no standardized court that you had to go through, a person could even go through a police court, I kid you not, in a town. And so you may not automatically find those immigration papers where you would expect them to be. Nor were they, if they were in a police court, guess what? They weren't listed. It was just Beck coming in, but it doesn't tell you what he came in for. I kind of stayed away from police court till I knew that. So naturalization is a tale of several kinds of documents. You might actually find the immigration documents first and then the naturalization doc, or vice versa. Or you might only find one out of 3 or 4 parts. One of the things you should look for before 1906 and well up to about 1919 is a declaration of intention. You might find it. It's known as the first papers or the intent to become a citizen. It was the first thing in the process of becoming a citizen. Don't be surprised if you find a couple of them for the same person. If they moved from county to county, sometimes they felt they'd better apply again. So take a look. They had to state their intention to become a citizen, renounce forever all allegiance to any foreign prince or state or sovereignty. I forgot the Y there. That's your spelling test. The immigrant could submit his declaration of intention as soon as he arrived. Most waited for 2 years. I'll tell you, right after our nation started in the 1790s, there was at one point even a 14-year waiting period. We got that changed. There were some people who just didn't want people to become citizens, but we did get that changed. You have to, at this point, use the definitions list and know the documents and know the terms used. If you were looking today for someone who came into the United States, there is no declaration of intention. You have papers today in the United States. If you look at those documents that you're going to sign to become a citizen, you have to prove when you came in. And so that looks very different. But in the past, you want to look for this document. And you want to use the definitions list, because don't forget that a declaration of intention, sometimes called intention and sometimes called first paper, can be confusing. Prepare to use these tools. Prepare to use your timeline. Prepare to use the US censuses, because they are going to be really helpful to you. On the next slide, after this one, get your note-taking skills ready, because I'm going to quickly show you the ones the censuses which will give you that information. You should look for a declaration of intention, look for the petition or the second papers or final papers. They've been called all 3 of those, submitted from 1790 to 1824. There was a 3-year waiting period. In 1824, the period changed to 2 years. And there have been stop-em-ups all along the way, especially for people who come from Asia. Immigration papers, you might frequently find a passenger list that gives you a hint. You want to get that passenger list. There isn't any one of these things that's more important than the next thing. They are all important. After 1940, you want to find the passport, along with other things. That's right. We did not have standardized passport procedures, nor did we demand them till the 1940s. And there will always be all kinds of rule changes. Just watch what this Congress isn't doing because they can't figure out what to do with immigration and naturalization. How can looking at census documents help? Aliens are identified by an AL. That means not naturalized in 1820, 1830, 1840. Now, these are the censuses where it only records the head of household, but you will see them identified as an AL. if they are an alien. Another question was the year of immigration was asked in 1900, 1910, 1920, and 1930. Another helpful thing for you is the number of years living in the United States was asked in 1890. You won't find that census because first it was burned, and then whatever wasn't burned was ruined by water in a fire 30 years after that census was taken. You'll also find it in the census for 1900. The naturalization status, that is the NA, that's what it looks like, is asked in 1870 only for males over 21. Remember, females were just there attached to their husbands or their fathers. It's asked again in 1900, 1910, 1920, and 1930. So one of the things you want to do if you're having trouble finding naturalization is you want to make sure as soon as possible that you've done those censuses first and been really systematic, because I have those on my personal shopping list first whenever I'm going to a new family. They can really help me with lots of things, because remember, the censuses, those decennial censuses that the United States asks every 10 years, the questions are not the same. Each of your documents are going to be different. It's going to depend on the court venue and the time. Until 1906, documents at that point became standardized, but they could be very different before then, and even for a couple of years after, because there were courts who said, I'm using up my own paperwork first because I got it printed. So be aware of the fact that even though it was a demanded law, you can find some things that are handwritten after that date. And they couldn't be in police court anymore. That's the only thing I can tell you. So that part is eliminated. Some petitions may actually be petitions with witnesses. That's interesting. And finally, an evidence of an oath of allegiance. You'll find that by the 1940s, by the way. Other documents may only be a summary granting the citizenship, but showing that it's a legal document. I'm going to say, I was being kind here saying, consider getting all the docs. I'm just going to say, you need to get them all. So here's a declaration of intention to become a citizen from a person in Montana Territory on February 20 in 1888. His name is William H. Simpson, and he says he's a citizen of Great Britain, and he's going to wait a couple of years to apply for citizenship. Now, let me tell you the other bonus thing you can look for so that you can find this in what I call the packet all in one. Go out immediately and look at glowrecords.gov, and so that you can see, or glowrecords.gov, so that you can immediately see whether or not he applied for a homestead. This man did. And so you'll even find a copy or at least an attested to document from the court saying, yes, he has applied and he is in this process, or he has gotten his citizenship. By the way, he could not complete that homestead requirement and get the homestead until he was or she was a citizen. Homestead files and pension files can also give you some of this information. So those are two additional places where you might want to look. The naturalization papers found in a pension file are going to be court documents from local courts that refer to the naturalized status. They will add to your file on that person, and you should get them. That may be the only thing you find, but someone in the local district court has attested to that, and so it's official. So here's a land patent detail for William H. Simpson, that guy I just showed you. He got 160 acres on April 27, 1898. So we know he was a citizen by then. So that even helps you. It gives you the end result and says, wait a minute, if I haven't chucked out the $50 yet to get his land patent file from the National Archives, then I should be looking locally to see if I can find his final naturalization paper. Either place, but I recommend both. Citizenship for the family. Did my ancestor apply for both himself and herself and a family? by the 1930s, yes, they did. And how did that affect the children? Frequently, if you told when and where they were born and where they were living at that point, there were easier routes for them to get citizenship. Wasn't always automatic. Remember to ask yourself whether your ancestor got his citizenship under a special law, because some of those people down in Texas got that citizenship under a special law when certain land was taken into the United States. And you also need to know, when you're looking at citizenship, what courts you should be looking in. What were the courts that were available and that had the right to grant citizenship in that state or in that colony back before 1776 or in that territory that's been granted? Here's one for August, his first name, a naturalization in 1898. It's just a very simple document, but it does satisfy everything that was asked for in that 1906 rule already, although it does miss one thing, and that is his age, I believe. So be aware that they can be different. A bonus is that you're going to get their signature also. And a bonus for this, by the way, is a lot of these things are available free for you out online at familysearch.org. So here's another one for John Baca, a Department of Commerce and Labor Naturalization Service. Be aware of the fact that the Naturalization Service went under different names at different times. This is a summary. It just says, and this is out online, that it says John Baca and his wife. It names him as naturalized, his wife and his children and their residence and his residence out at Belt, and their ages, his intention to become a citizen. And in Cascade County, it tells when he filed the final petition to become a citizen, hot dog, in 1907, which means if I were looking for those papers, I'd find even more, wouldn't I? Here's a declaration of intention from Maryland, I believe. Yeah, or pardon me, from Missouri in 1907. And it says that he had originally applied way back in 1892. And it shows you everything there. This is a new application process for declaring one's intention. I show you this one because you should be aware that in the eastern states in the United States, they had adopted some very formalized types of application. It was the West that still didn't have stuff that was really formalized. And so this is before 1907, but he has filed everything. It shows his last foreign residence, can be great for you, the ship he came in on, all kinds of things. So occasionally I'm curious. I want to know, did my female ancestor obtain her citizenship or naturalization status through her father or her husband? What if she was a US citizen but married a foreigner? You need really, especially with women, to be aware and hold in your mind what citizenship rights women did not automatically have before 1920. Or somebody told me, I noticed my ancestor never applied for naturalization. What could be the reason? In 1940, this dude out at stock at San Coulee was still an alien. He came into the post office in Great Falls, was sent back out to Stockett to his post office and said, you have to apply out there, but you're going to have to fill out a complete questionnaire. These are like gold. They're down in Denver, doggone it. But if you were an alien, you had to fill out a complete questionnaire, and they started following you. That's how they knew where all those Japanese people, Italian people, and German people were right after December 7, 1941. So I've given you in your handouts today, and you could look at them later. I've given you a couple, but I'm just going to concentrate on Elizabeth Quisberg of Cascade County. She's the final 4 sheets in your paper, probably. But She was an alien in 1940 and applying for citizenship. And if you look at her documents, they're very interesting. I'll show you the next one before I come back here. She has an evidence of arrival in the United States. It's called a certificate of arrival that was issued by Seattle, Washington, by the assistant director for the Seattle district on February 8. He said, okay, it was issued on February 8, 1937. Now, here's what we know about this woman. She wanted to become a citizen of the United States, and she had to apply. And what we can see here is the port of entry is Sweetgrass, Montana. Now, if you're looking out on the internet for Sweetgrass, Montana, for those things, you're not going to find it. You're going to find it under St. Albans in Vermont. Hate to tell you that, but all of those things coming across from the border, or pretty many of them from Canada, are all in one place. So become aware of why you want to know about St. Albans and the Canadian paperwork coming through there. She got this, and so she could prove that on February 8, 1937, when she is applying for her first papers, that she had come in and there was proof and somebody had signed off on it. She came in via train. She made her declaration of intention at Great Falls on February 18, 1937. Remember that document I just showed you. She has to wait the 2 years, folks, for her petition for citizenship. And the next 2 pages will show you, I mean, her certificate, her declaration of intention, if you're looking at it, you can see it even has a picture of this woman at the bottom, and it tells you all about her. So she's completed the standardized format. And what you're going to discover there is she's a divorced woman. Now, what happened to this woman? Well, this woman was born in Nebraska. Yeah, she was born in Nebraska. And in 1908, later she would think she did a very silly thing then, but in 1908, she married a foreigner. She married a Canadian or someone who was an alien who went to Canada later. When she did that, I want you to remember, she lost her citizenship. At that point, she didn't even know. Remember, at that point, Elizabeth could not vote, even if she was an adult, not unless she was in a place where they allowed voting for, in the United States anyway, for a local school board election. You could do that. She applies and she has to wait 2 years. If you turn to the next page to her petition for citizenship, that's on April 11, 1940, the day she takes her oath of allegiance to the United States. So she's gone through all of this. She came back with her children into the United States in 1923, and it wasn't until all those years later, 14 years later, that she was really looking and saying, I really think I'm going to need that US citizenship. Otherwise, it looks like we're going to be going to war, and I don't want to be classified alien and unable to do certain things. So Elizabeth was doing a very wise thing, getting her oath of allegiance, and I'm going to turn over to that now, because she filed a witness petition for naturalization, and she took her oath of allegiance. And I want you to remember, until 1908, when she was a little kiddo, she had been a U.S. citizen. But here she gets her oath of allegiance. It's signed off, and they've taken great care in my county to show exactly where it is available, along with a list of other people. So that's what it's like, and that's why you want to be very, very careful of what you're doing with women when you're looking for citizenship. Anticipate misspellings, would you please? They're all over. They're just rife with these. I performed an exhaustive search of my Nanick family. I already had at least Nanick, spelled I-K, spelled I-C-K. I spelled it E-C-K, E-K, all kinds of things. I still could not find my grandma and her mom and her 5 siblings. I wanted to find them, and I finally did find them by going to the sound system, which we'll do in a later workshop. I wanted to find them because I knew that on October 28, 1886, that was the day that up in New York, in that harbor, we actually accepted from France the Statue of Liberty. Now, it was important to me, even though I knew at that point that my grandma and her mom and 5 siblings came in down at Baltimore. But I really had to do a lot of searching because I finally found them 7 cards, a card from each person, spelled Nank. It must have sounded like that to the person who was taking the information down. Anticipate those misspellings. You're going to find online naturalization indexes in some things I'm showing you. I am turning now to the one pager that I gave you on naturalization information available on the internet. Give you a second to find that. We're going to spend our last few minutes looking at some very interesting things. I've actually given you 8 sites that I consider to be stellar. Of course, NARA, the National Archives, and the one-step web pages by Steve Morse are going to save you so much time, and everything is free there, and he is wonderful. He happened to invent a very important computer chip and has spent the rest of his life pretty much doing various kinds of things with his family tree, and we benefit from it because everything from Stephen is free. The wee monster, better known today as Joe Bean. You want to go out and look at his fabulous site because he's going to tell you more than Germany, all kinds of things. His site just keeps going on, and it's another freebie. Yes, Ancestry and MyHeritage and Find My Past also have some kind of information for this, but I want you to remember they cost you dollars. So be careful of what you're doing. Family Search is available to you, and you will have choices there. Remember, they have an indexed side and they have an unindexed side that you're going to have to learn about and utilize. I've given you some pointers here. And finally, you're not done shopping, as Cal down in my neighborhood would say, if you haven't been to the Olive Tree site. So let's take a look at these. One-step web pages by Steve Morse. You're going to go out to Steve Morse, spelled STEVE, Morse.org. He has ports of immigration, all of them. Do not assume that they all came in through New York. They didn't. I have found my family in Boston. I have found them in New York. I have found them in San Francisco. Please go look because they're all one step. He takes you into them, and he says some of them take too doggone many steps if you're looking at Ancestry or whatever. So he shows you how to do it in a one-step process for each and every site separately. His free links are amazing, and his strategies and classes out on the internet for free at YouTube are fabulous. I've given you a few of them here, the one-step tools for the 50 census. They were fabulous using the Steve Morse one-step method. There's a 3-stepper here from a person out at Family Search it's just great if you are looking for those things. I'm just showing you, I mean, his site is very, very, very plain. This is 1/10 of his site. 1/10. So he'll show you stuff from Galveston and New Orleans and Philadelphia and Hamburg outbounds and the Canadian border crossings where you don't have to know that it's from Vermont, etc. Joe Bean, my next character, we've called for a long time because he called himself the wee monster. And he has all kinds of things, and he'll show you where things are, what's free and what's not. All the online international ship passenger lists, he's got them. Naturalization records, he's got them. He's got his own guide and an online searchable naturalization index and records, because some of them are found at national sites, some are at states. He's got all kinds of things. He's got German stuff, but he goes way beyond there. All the online birth and marriage record indexes in the United States, but they're for free. They don't cost money. Just pointing these out. He has immigration and immigration record passenger lists. Remember, emigrating, you're going out of a country, and immigrating, you're coming into another country. So he'll show you all of these, and hot diggity dog, if you notice, these are hot links. They're really very, very cool. And he'll show you how to find other passenger lists before 1820. if he knows about them. He takes tips from people, so contact Joe if you've got one. In 1957 on this list, there's things for finding Boston passenger lists, Baltimore passenger lists, all kinds of things, Germans to America, all kinds of stuff. And again, hot links are there. And it shows you that even though he liked the German immigrants first, he took time to do all the non-German immigrants too. What a guy. The olive tree site I was talking to you about, and I said you're not done shop until you've used it. They have naturalization records. They have ship lists. They have this fantastic thing called a 5-step search strategy to find your immigrant ancestor in both the United States and in Canada. And I love those direct links because he makes it easy for me anyway, since I don't often find my people where I think they should be, to eliminate at least the things that I don't have to look at anymore. Remember, all of these, though, just give you preliminary information. You still need to get the original documents. So you need to follow those documents to the place where they're stored or to the place where they are available. And please remember that each and every day there are good volunteers out there, like we've got in our library this afternoon, doing just that, digitizing these things for free so we can find them. Go out and look at Family Search. NARA has a thing that I think is just cool. Out at NARA, it's not so much of a helping place to find your citizen directly, although you can in some instances, but they have the frequently asked questions and answers. You know, other people have been asking the same questions you're asking, and sometimes you can just speed in 20 or 30 seconds through those answers and say, oh, they asked the actual thing. So what can they do? Like my ancestor was naturalized in a county court, so does NARA have their record? Nope, but they'll tell you why. And they'll tell you for each state why they don't. It's worth looking at. So in conclusion, naturalization research requires really careful planning. You need to note that precise or approximate time of coming to the United States and put it right into your ancestor timeline. Don't just note it to the side. I mean, after all, if you're making a timeline of your ancestor, aren't you making it so other people can follow that timeline? Don't you want to include it with your story? I hope you do. So look at that immigration naturalization timelines to see how the context applies to your ancestor. Formally ask the questions you want to answer and write them down. If you cannot think of questions to ask, then please go to the sheet that I have given you of question so that you can look at that one, because I've given you a whole bunch of questions that you can utilize. Keep yourself on a targeted search, and as you receive the answers, evaluate that information that you've gotten. Maybe you have to aggregate it with other information you've received, but continuously reach a conclusion, write your summary for what you've got so far. It'll be easier when you just have to add information into that ancestral summary. Remember, if we're going to look for these things, it isn't just for us, it's for the future. But people won't know if we don't write a cogent statement about what we found. And in conclusion, another helpful strategy always is to look at the people around them. If you still can't find a naturalization, if you can't find immigration, if you can't find these things, don't assume that they jumped ship and came in, and so that's why you can't find it. Don't give up that easily. It's not evenly distributed across families, that kind of information. So if you only follow your direct line, you're going to reach a brick wall. So you may have to follow their brothers or sisters or their aunts or their uncles or other people who came into the country first, so that you can get that information on those documents, then find the documents you want and also find them in the newspapers. For the rest of the summer, keep on searching, keep on doing things. And I remind you that we also have all of my other talks pretty well, except for the one I haven't redone yet on divorces. But everything is available out at YouTube at our Great Falls Genealogy Society YouTube site, and it's all for free, folks. The thing I am going to ask you to do, I'm going to stop my screen share now. and go back to y'all and ask if you have any questions, and you can unmute yourself whenever you wish to. Together.
Jen, I have a question.
Okay.
I was looking at my great grandma last night and trying to find her naturalization, just poking around and seeing what I could find. And I kept coming up. Okay, when she came through Ellis Island, she ended up in Ohio, where she married my great grandpa, and then everybody moved to Nebraska. Well, looking at my grandpa's on my mom's side, on his naturalization papers, it was a few years, several or many years, that he was naturalized after he got here. And so I'm thinking, okay, I keep finding my great grandma's name tied to this Illinois, I can't remember, some sort of Illinois office record thing. I can't remember exactly what it's called. But anyway, to look there for her name for any naturalization. Now, since she was living in Nebraska, could that be, like you were talking about, a completely different state?
Well, it could be, but what I would ask you first of all, and we're going to get a little feedback here with this, bear with me. You want to, when they say look there in Illinois for naturalization, it may not be hers. It could be her dad's. You need to look at the law at that time to see, did the law apply that when he applied, she automatically got her citizenship through him. It won't name the
Okay.
kids, won't name the kids, won't name the wife, but you have to look at the legislation so that you're aware of what happens.
Yeah, because I don't know. I know when she came into the States, but as to when everybody moved, from Ohio to Nebraska, I have no clue.
Yeah, you do, because
So,
you're going to look at the censuses, and you're
oh,
not going to look just for her. You're going to look for those other people, because even if she's not listed in that census, it will tell you and give you at least a 10-year prospectus on when they went to Nebraska. And if you're lucky in Nebraska, they went during the years, there were 4 or 5 years where they did a state census every year, and those are all available to you online.
okay.
Hot
I'm
diggity
typing this.
dog. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because I ended up finding my grandpa's, the one I sent you, by researching his wife, my grandma,
Yep.
which is like, what? Just because her name is mentioned on there. I couldn't find it. I thought, well, I'm going to see if I can, cross-reference, if I can find it under him. I didn't. I found it under her, which was just weird.
Yeah, but you be aware of the fact that you're going to find direct evidence, sometimes with names. You're going to find indirect evidence, but the indirect evidence is good if you're during that time when women got their citizenship when their husband did. By the way, if the husband applied for a homestead and died during the homestead process, and uh, when you look through that homestead process, if he died, frequently the wife or the person who became the successor to that homestead automatically got that homestead early. Just another little
Well,
bonus thing for you.
he was born in the States.
Yeah.
And so that's, that I wouldn't, but I could, looking under Martin's stuff, I could maybe see if I could find that.
Sure. We have one other
Up.
person who just gave us some just some wonderful information. One person here says, after researching for 7 years, I sent for the alien registration that was taken during World War II. It gave me a wealth of, that is 3 pages of information on my grandfather from Greece who came in 1907 through New York. It gave me the ship, the name he used on the passenger list, his occupation, and his daily living. Wow, that is fantastic.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
I've been about about a year, almost a year and a half waiting from the National Archives for information on my cousin. I don't
Oh,
know. I don't know what that, and I already paid the money, so we'll see what happens, I guess.
yeah, let me know when you get it. I'm excited. If you people will share with me some of these things, I can even, if you're unsure of the document, I am quite willing just to help you with your document. As you say, well, it says this, what does that mean, or whatever. But I'm going to tell you again today, you want to use your timeline, you want to use the terminology and write down other terminology you find, because the terminology sheet, I have discovered, no matter what, I've never had one of those that is totally complete, especially before 1906, because special terms were used in different states. So be aware of it. If you're in southern state, in fact, those courts frequently use terms that were not used too much anymore, and they were still using them in the 1880s. So you have to be aware of the terminology. It can really help you. And then the naturalization information from folks like Steve Morse and from Joe Bean, people who have done things at the Olive Tree site, the stuff from Family Search, it's all fantastic. And you're going to be able to find that. You do want to go out and look at the U.S. immigration naturalization sites today just to see what is going on there and what is there. I think you're going to be amazed if you ever go look at the questions that are at random, by the way, that people are asked who are gaining citizenship. You will see how hard they have to study in order to become a U.S. citizen.
I want to try that and see what happens if I could actually be,
Yeah, it's an interesting process. It's a good process, and it's one I recommend that you all, if you get the opportunity, please go to a citizenship activity in your district court. They are well worth it. If you're not aware of when it is, you might try. I know locally that we have people who are who will go and give flags to the new U.S. citizens, and so it may be your Daughters of the Revolution or the Sons of the Revolution or any other organization. Maybe it might even be your Lions Club or whatever that participates. Just find out what that organization is in your community so you can be invited to the next particular one. It's really fun. You'll also get to see some quite touching adoptions. And the adoption and the citizenship occurs there. It's very cool.
I wanted to share a concern I have. Here, this is a strange situation. My mother was born in New York. She became an American citizen, of course, by birth. She was Italian. She was raised in the orphanage in Great Falls, St. Thomas Orphanage. I have those records. She was taken back to Italy, and she had a daughter there, and that's my half sister Florence. When my sister Florence came to the United States, my mother just said, I'm an American citizen. She's now American citizen. When my sister went to take a trip a long time ago when she was in her 70s, found out my sister had no record of being an American citizen.
Yep.
And it was the year of 1924, I believe, or 25, that it went by the men, not by the ladies. My mother had married an Italian.
Yep.
So now my sister finds out that she is actually illegal, an alien. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
She was on the passenger thing. She came over with my mother, but there's no record of her ever being a citizen.
Yep. You have to go through the paperwork, and it's probably a formality at this point, but it's going to be helpful for you if you make a very complete timeline, if you actually show in there what has happened in life, and then you can get that, or she can.
Right. So my sister, because she was on my mother's passport, the Filipino lady in Hawaii, let her go to Italy and gave her a passport. But she said she really shouldn't, because if my sister didn't have a passport, she went back to Italy, she would have to stay there. She could not come back to the United States.
I'm not aware of that. That could be good information
Okay.
or not so good information. You would, one of the things you can do is contact the U.S. consulate for
Uh-huh.
the information. But remember, you're looking at the timeline, the actual time when that happened. And if you're not sure of that, one of the things you can also do is contact your U.S. senator and have them help you work through the process. They do this quite a bit.
Well, my sister has passed away, but I think it's interesting for people to know that. The
Yeah.
other question I have is when I go into the records in the census, and my cousin Carol Woodley, you may have known her, she did extensive things on naturalization and applications. The women, the Italian women, Swedish and Norwegians, at that time they worked for the railroad. The husbands applied for naturalization, not always completed it, but the women never did.
Well,
So, you know what I'm saying? So, uh, to me, find no records, only one record of any one becoming a citizen. So people think that their family all did it legally, but it's not the case. And so,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. Go back and look at that timeline again. Look at the records and look at what the specifications were, Nancy. And I wish you luck with that.
yeah.
Uh,
Now,
anyone else before we leave?
yes. Yeah, I have one more question. My grandmother was German. She was born in Kentucky and 18 something. And, but anyway, I cannot find immigration records on her.
You won't, because she was born in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so that's just the answer, huh?
Yep, that's the answer.
Okay, thank you.